Every man has his heroes, and every life is made up of stories. Heroic Stories is a series from heroicmen.org to find out why some men choose the harder path in life, even when it means losing everything, how they survived, and who they are today. These men seem heroic to us, even if they don't call themselves that. They seem to have an extra strength in their system, extra grit to battle doubt and find purpose. All of these men are seeking divine friendship with God, and they all believe in building up faith, building up men, and building up our future. Sponsored by CatholicSpeakers.com and hosted by Dominic from Heroic Men, get the mindsets, the scars, and the playbooks that these men have earned the hard way. Heroism isn't born, it's made, and these are their stories. Hi friends, and welcome back to Heroic Stories. I'm joined today by Nathan Crankfield. He's a sales manager at Hallow, and he also runs his own project, Seeking Excellence, which is continuing to grow. Nathan, it's good to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my man. It's good to see you again. It's great to reconnect and an honor to be here on Heroic Men.
Awesome. Agreed. Likewise, we've known each other since 2020. So we were working online conferences together. Somehow we started collaborating around then. So it's good to reconnect. So you're staying busy. And what we do on this show is we talk about heroism. It's an idea that sometimes it feels like just showing up and being a good man today can feel absolutely heroic and frankly impossible. And there's all kinds of reasons why. And I'm curious to get kind of your take on it. And so we got 4 questions we're going to run through. And they're kind of designed to not chip away at, but kind of reveal the heart of men that we are talking with, men who are joining us. Because if heroism is a hard thing, we need to understand what it is, how it works, what are better examples. More importantly, what are the examples that you're looking at? What are the stories that light you up? So there's my first question for you. Let's get into it. What is a story of heroism that absolutely lights you up? And it could be from the news, or it could be from fiction, your own life, something you heard. And every time you hear that story, you're like, that's a hero right there. That's something heroic right there.
Yeah, I think one of the things, you mentioned I work for Hallow. I think we do a great job of this with some of our prayer challenges, is highlighting different stories of heroism. And there's a few that come to mind. I think, on the Catholic front, and for me, especially as a husband and father, one of my favorite saints is St. Thomas More. And I think that his heroic act, I always kind of call him like one of the saints of our time. I think of what we need, especially for men. And for those who don't know his story, I can, very briefly give his kind of tale.
Why is he so heroic for you?
Yeah, he's an absolute rock star. I think, my podcast, Seeking Excellence, I'm all about excellence and being excellent in all these different realms of life. And I think he really demonstrated that in his lifetime. And so he rose through the ranks of going to law school. He originally wanted to be a priest, but then he gets sent to law school and just rises through the ranks, becomes a politician, and is just absolutely crushing it all the way to becoming the king's right-hand man, King Henry VIII. And beautiful story of him, just even though he wanted to be a priest, he wanted to be a monk, he continues to kind of live that out. Some of that asceticism. He was known for wearing his hair shirt, serious fasting, for going to mass regularly, for, having deep prayer life. And he's in this time that becomes more and more tumultuous. Obviously, you have the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther leading the way happening during his lifetime. And he's King Henry VIII's right-hand man. Something that I think a lot of people don't know is that he actually helped King Henry VIII write a rebuttal, kind of like fighting back against Martin Luther and like some of these original reformer, quote unquote reformers of the church, of Christianity, however you want to look at it, Protestantism, and was awarded, the Pope actually gave King Henry VIII an award about this because like their work was so great in defending Catholicism, defending the church. And then, as many people know, King Henry VIII gets into this situation romantically where he wants to divorce his wife who hadn't given him an heir yet, his words, not mine. And he wanted to marry someone else. And the Pope said, no, you can't do that. You can't just divorce your wife on the grounds that she hasn't given you a son. She's also not choosing to not give you a son, but that's something we more understand now than they probably believed back then. But anyways, he decides that, okay, well, we're next then. I'm going to establish the Church of England. I'm going to be the head of the Church of England. Everybody's going to submit to me as basically the Pope of the Church of England. And St. Thomas More refused to do this. In the midst of all this, something I skipped that I think is a really important note to the story that I think is what makes him so heroic, or part of what does, is his wife passed away. So they had several children together. His wife died. He ends up marrying a widow who also had lost her husband. And they had she had a couple of children herself, and they kind of have this blended family. And I think that's important because, as he's rejecting this, he first steps down from his role and says, I just can't publicly partake in it. And then they keep pursuing him to say, no, you need to sign off on this. You need to endorse this. You need to come out and say that this new marriage, this divorce and marriage situation is good. And he refuses to do it all the way up to the point of the guillotine. And so he gets beheaded and he dies as a martyr. And he writes these beautiful letters to his children and all these things. And I think that why I say he's so much the hero of our times, or exhibits a lot of the virtues I think we need, is when it comes to speaking up, when it comes to defending fundamental parts of the faith, we all have excuses. And I hear these excuses from people all the time, especially men and women, but people who find themselves very timid to go out there and be bold and to be authentically Catholic, to teach the truth and stand for goodness against evil. Is we have these excuses. Oh, I've worked really hard to get to where I am. Well, I have kids and family to provide for. I have this or I have that. And he had that as well. He had a family to provide for. He had worked really hard to get to where he was in his career. His children had already lost their mother, and his stepchildren had already lost their father. And so think of like all the things I think that we kind of look to and we say, oh, I can't do it because of this or that. He faced all of those things and he just overcame them and decided, which I think is also very timely for the age that we live in. He was like, marriage is actually worth dying for. I think it's important to note that they didn't ask him to rebuke Christ as Lord. They didn't ask him to say, say the Trinity is false, or one of these kind of like more fundamental doctrines that we think of that unite us as Christians broadly. That to, I think, our modern ears would make more sense. No, he refused to bow down to divorce, which, I mean, obviously in our world today, the structure that we have, and many in the church, this would seem absolutely absurd to think that you would risk giving your life over for honoring the sacrament of holy matrimony. So he's one of my favorites for sure.
How did you first hear about him, or was there something going on in your life where you first learned about him and then you went, man, this guy's amazing? What was going on in your life such that this particular figure matters to you so much?
Yeah, it's a interesting thing because he's one of those, I think, if you're pretty involved in the church, if you know the lives of the saints, I would say he's probably one of the top 50 to 100 at least. Maybe I think 50 would be pretty safe to say for most people, that they've heard the general tale. They know that he was, beheaded for the sake of, during the Protestant Reformation and kind of sticking with the church over one of these, new sects of Christianity. I think most people know that. And that's kind of how I was, that I was like aware of him, but it's not like he was my confirmation saint or that we go way back. It's actually this really interesting thing that his story came more and more to mind. And as many people will describe that are practicing the faith, you talk about having kind of saint friends or people who kind of follow you around, and you start to see prayer cards and books, and they come up in talks and things you're listening to, and they just seem more and more present in your life. And what was beautiful for me was he really came about, I think, in 2020. So with the lockdowns and BLM and all these different things that were happening during that year, that was obviously very tumultuous. I think we got very divided as a nation, and you got to see a lot of this. You got to see a lot of people who said, I'm really convicted about X, Y, or Z, whatever the thing may be, but I'm still going to go with what the government says. I'm still going to go with what this says. I'm still going to post a black square. You name whatever the thing is. And again, I'm not even, we don't need to get into a debate about, we can, but we need to get into a debate about which things we should fight for and which ones we wouldn't. But it's one thing to see people who are convicted, that believe that something is wrong, that believe something is not best for them, a man that believes something is not best for their family, and still choose to do it anyways. And still choose to go along with it anyways, freely, without a fight, all those sorts of things. And so I was just seeing this a lot, and I was like, man, who had all these same excuses was St. Thomas More. And so he kind of came up to me then, but I would say I felt like he really pursued me in a sense. During the year of 2022, which is when me and my wife, Emily, got married. I have a tumultuous and distant relationship with my father that really got a lot worse in 22, 23. And to the point where we haven't spoken in, I think it's been almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years now. And yeah, I'm happy to get into some of that as well. But it was amazing to me, this beautiful reflection that I had of, nobody can replace your earthly father. But I had this beautiful moment of kind of simultaneously, while my relationship with my dad was becoming more and more strained, this increasing relationship with St. Thomas More, and kind of feeling like, I want this, I've always yearned for this role model, this Catholic role model, especially as a husband and father, that I could have in my life. And he kind of came into my life right around this same time. And so I feel like we've had this pretty strong bond since around 22, 23 for sure.
Amazing, amazing. Well, look, I'm curious to then learn a little bit more about you. That's what this next question is all about. It's what a little bit of your story, and really, what I'm looking for is what was the hardest decision that you've ever had to make so far? And maybe you look back and realize that was a really tough thing, and I'm a different guy now, and maybe I'd make a different decision, or I learned something out of that. That was a defining thing. What is that story? What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's been a lot of big decisions along the way. I became Catholic. I was 13 years old. I was the first Catholic on both sides of my family, largely due to my Catholic schooling, but also a lot of that was due to just the difficulties in my childhood and a lot of the challenges and adversity that I faced with my parents.
Sorry,
You know,
you said you became Catholic and you were going to Catholic school at 13,
that's right. Yep.
before or after the conversion? Were
I was
your
going to
parents
Catholic school from kindergarten.
okay?
Yeah.
But you
And
weren't
so
Catholic at the time.
that's right. Yep. Baptized
Okay,
Lutheran. I was
I
actually
see.
baptized the same day as my father, which I always think is a very interesting stat. And the more
Okay,
you know about the story, the more interesting that fact is. But he really never practiced his faith, never called himself a Christian throughout pretty much all of my childhood. And my mom wanted me to go to school to get a good education. She was like, I think I want to put him in private school. I was her only child. I was the youngest of my dad's seven by five
okay,
different women. And my mom was, all in on me because I was her only child. And so she's working overtime and things to put me into Catholic school. To her, it was just kind of all the same. It's like they're teaching him
okay,
about Jesus, Methodist preschool, Lutheran church, Catholic grade school, and so she didn't understand or care about denominations. And so come eighth grade, I see all my friends who have been receiving sacraments and all this stuff along the way, and I'm like, I don't receive sacraments. I don't get to receive the Eucharist at Mass, and I'm like one of the only people in my class who actually believe this. I'm one of the only people who ever gets excited for school masses and things like that. And so I asked our pastor, Father Dan Powell, and he said, "Yeah, if your parents are okay with it, we can confirm you next month." And I said, "Great,
wow.
I'll ask them." And they didn't care, and so I became Catholic. Kind of, just a random thing that happened. It kind of seems as this like mountaintop experience, and I think it was in a sense. But then I really just went downhill the next year, losing my virginity, starting to smoke weed, starting to drink and party and do all those sorts of things, and really following down this path of my older brothers, my dad, and a lot of people, a lot of the men, especially in my family
Hmm.
history. And so definitely a pivotal moment was changing from that. I think choosing to go to Mount St. Mary's University, choosing a rural, authentically, at least at the time, very authentically Catholic place
Yeah.
that I knew would be good for me in the long run versus a party school or some of these other places I had applied to
So
was
why
was
did you
definitely
choose that? I mean,
a big
life was
call.
good and it was happening for a minute there. Why did you make a decision for Mount St. Mary's?
Yeah, the biggest reason is because of my visit. So I attended a visit day at the Mount, and they did a really great job. They were amazing of just pairing me up with a great student. I got to meet the chaplain. We got to meet the president. We got to meet all kinds of people there. And my genuine thought, and what I always hold to and cling to as the reason why I went there, is I felt like it was, if not the first, one of the first places I had really encountered people who were joyful. I knew
Right.
people who had been
Hmm.
happy and had seasons of happiness in their life. My parents were always very up and down
Okay.
emotionally throughout my childhood, and a lot of my family was the same way. I think, looking back now through my framework of understanding in the world and what I believe, it makes a lot of sense because I was raised around a lot of people who were very distant from God, and I think knew better, a lot of them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I know in my life, when I've known better and choose the other thing, I get pretty miserable. I would definitely not describe myself as joyful in those periods of life, and obviously still struggle and fall into that from time to time as well now. But that was a huge thing for me. Is I was just like, these people were joyful, and I had this hope that maybe I could become joyful as well. Maybe by coming here, if I do the
Hmm.
same things they do, which I don't even know what that is, but maybe I can learn from them how to be joyful. Because I was always pretty happy. One best smile in high school. I was always smiling. But I knew a lot of people thought I was happier than I was. I knew deep
Right.
down I wasn't depressed, but I knew there was a lot more, and I just
Hmm.
kind of had that hunger for more, and I've always had that kind of desire for more. And the Lord, ultimately fulfilled that, I think, while I was there at the Mount.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
yeah, the Mount was big. I think another pivotal decision I made there, I joined Army ROTC, so I went on to become an infantry officer in the Army, go to airborne school, go to Ranger school, and yeah, a lot of pivotal decisions in there too. But I think that was certainly one of the hinge decisions of my life as well, is to choose the hard thing, to choose to go infantry, to choose that so I could go to airborne school and to go to Ranger school and
Mhm.
to pursue the 82nd Airborne Division and all those sorts of things was definitely really pivotal in me becoming who I am today.
Did that flow naturally, or did somebody new come in and impress you? Is that something you'd always thought about?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. I had, since I was 10 years old, I credit the movie SWAT with Colin Farrell, Samuel L. Jackson,
Okay.
LL Cool J with a lot of my love for the military because, accurate or not, most of the guys in that film had been previous like special operations in some capacity. Samuel L. Jackson was Marine Recon, his character. Colin Farrell's was a Navy SEAL beforehand. And so I was like, I left SWAT and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Wow.
And I was like, I want to do that. And obviously, at 10 years old, I'm like, in order to do that, I have to be in the military first. And so then I was like heavy into GI Joes and all these kinds of things there for a time period. The little, like you see in Toy Story, the little army green guys with the parachutes throwing
Hmm.
them off the banister and those sorts of things. And so I had always desired it. I told my mom when I was kind of at my rock bottom point at 15, like deep in sin and, you know, smoking weed and partying and just like really that was the main priority of my life. I was really empty and I was like, I'm just going to enlist. I'm just going to enlist in the Marines as soon as I graduate from high school. And she's like, no, you're going to college. You have to go to college because she had sacrificed so much for my education. And to her, going to college was kind of this pinnacle decision that
Right.
was really important. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll go to college. So lo and behold, second week of college is the activities fair, and I'm signing up for all these different things. And I look at the end; it was like this magical thing. The way I remember it now, it's like a movie. You turn down this beautiful day in September, and you look down at the end of the brick pathway there. There's this huge army banner and table and all these things. And Sergeant Hollingsworth, who's definitely one of my heroes, he's standing there at the end, all 6'4" of him. And he's like, hey man, how's it going? And I get to talking to him and he's like, you could be in the army and we give out scholarships, sometimes full ride scholarships. And here I am not knowing how I'm going to pay for 4 years at this private university.
Wow.
And I'm like, you're telling me I could be in the army and you'll pay for me to go to college? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I don't know what I have to do for that, but I'd love to explore it. So,
Wow.
so that's why it was kind of all of the above. I'd always wanted
Yeah.
to do it and then got the opportunity to explore it more there at the Mount. So it
Amazing. Well,
was,
let's talk
yeah.
about your heroes. Tell me more about Sergeant Hollingsworth. Why is he a hero of yours?
Yeah, Sergeant Hollingsworth, I think he was one of the first people in my life that I got to see that loved what he did for work. And I think was very passionate about excellence, about just kind of fulfilling your potential. And it was something that I felt like I never fully had. Somebody who saw, there was a lot of people I think who saw potential in me. And there's some pivotal moments here along the way. But I even as a speaker now, podcaster, and the way that I describe this kind of spectrum to people is a lot of people we all need a pat on the back and a kick in the ass or a kick in the butt from time to time. And I think that a lot of times you have people that err and think they are 100-0. And I don't think anybody's 100-0. Some people might be 90-10. Some people, and this I think is men and women, some people need, 90% pat on the back and just 10% of the time kick on the butt. Some people need 90% kick in the butt, 10% pat on the back. I'm probably like 70, 30, 80, 20 with the majority being kick in the butt. And I had a lot of patting on the back as I was growing up. And so
Okay.
he was one of the first people that I knew cared about me, but also was like, dude, there's no reason why you're not on Dean's list. There's no reason why you don't have a perfect PT score, why you're not a 300 on the PT test. There's no reason why you're not one of the top cadets in this battalion. And just continued to just push me. He's like, you can do this. Like, I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. And then day in and day out with PT, checking on my grades and all these things, he got me to rise to heights that I just never had before. I think were always in me. And I just needed some of that extra push and direction and a goal and a vision for my life. I think he just understood a lot of that. And he was able and willing to do that for me. Here's this guy who's been multiple deployments, proven himself in war. He'd been in the 82nd Airborne Division and all these things. And was just awesome. And he was the interesting thing about, for my list of heroes, he might be the only one or one of the only ones from a person that I actually knew that's like purely secular, like no faith life, no religious background. He's here at this small Catholic university in rural Maryland. And he knew my faith was really important to me. He encouraged me even to try my best in that. And so I just love that. And I'm always so grateful for his leadership and his ability to see something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself at the time.
Do you know any more about, well, if maybe he doesn't want this stuff public or shared, I'm just curious, why was he that kind of a man? Because it sounds like it was the kind of thing you were looking for or hungry for, maybe. And you mentioned difficulties with your own dad. It sounds like he became a bit of a father figure for you. Do you have a sense of why he was that kind of a man?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really. I think
Okay.
that what I came to see, And what I think he taught us a lot, because you have a lot of leadership classes in the Army, is the Army has a lot of flaws, but I think leadership is something that they do really well.
Yeah.
And I think that this really is a fundamental aspect of leadership, is sometimes having those uncomfortable conversations to say, hey, you might be performing well, but you're not performing at your best. And I think that's something specifically that the military does really well, is they just say, we in certain times and phases and things tolerate a lot of mediocrity. I think we have, in recent years more than we should. And I think Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is trying to turn that around a little bit now. You can debate his tactics, but I think that overall mission or objective is good. But I think that's what he was doing. And he was just like, here's this guy who I think can be a stud. And when you are a leader, you're leading a team, you have to pick out who you think has the high potential, who has the highest ceiling. And I think that the best leaders are going to help their people reach their full potential. And everybody's going to have a different ceiling, and everybody has different floors potentially, but you have to try to find and identify, okay, who's operating at their very best and who can continue to, everybody can always continue to improve, but you can still be operating at your best for where you currently are. And being able to spot that in people and actually challenge them to say, hey, you're doing well, but I think you could do X, Y, or Z better, and I'm going to help you to get there, is a really beautiful thing. And so I think he took a lot of the principles of Army leadership very seriously, because that's what he then passed on and taught us from an Army leader perspective.
I want to come back and ask you about seeking excellence. There's a shield on the wall behind you. It sounds like everything that you're saying, I can see how all of that is influencing you and leading up to you starting this ministry, this apostolate, this project. Before we get to that, though, you mentioned he's pretty high up on your list of heroes, people that you reflect on, revere, look to. Who are some other heroes that have really formed you or motivated you, orient you in your life?
Yeah, he's certainly up there. There's no doubt about it. I think that another one that I love, that hopefully we'll get to hear this someday, or that some people out there might know. There's two priests I always come to mind when I think of my heroes: Father Chase Hilgenbrink and Father Jonathan Meyer. I often describe them as my favorite and my second favorite priests in the world.
Yeah.
And
so I've not heard of them. For those who never have, who are they?
That's great. Yeah. So Father Jonathan Meyer, he's the cure of Guilford, Indiana, is how I refer to him sometimes. The cure of ours, he loves St. John Vianney, and he's also in this very rural place in Indiana. I got to meet him during my time at Dynamic Catholic when I was living in Cincinnati, and he is just an absolute rock star. He was overseeing one parish that had 4 campuses at the time. Then he became the pastor of basically 4 parishes now that have 7 different campuses altogether. And he's just a great example of a servant leader. And he just is all about pushing himself, all about striving for excellence in everything that he does. He coaches cross country at the local public high school. He's very involved and knows everybody in the town, Catholic or not. And he's just an amazing leader. I think is really good at giving. He just had a video he sent me the other day of 40 altar servers at a Sunday mass. And he's developed this huge, wonderful culture of altar boys at his parishes. And it's just amazing. So he's been really inspirational for me, for sure, both on the spiritual front and as a leader. And then Father Chase, I think also, he's just a man of no excuses. He's a man of pure joy and true dedication to the Lord. He's a former professional soccer player. He's got a great little 5-minute biography thing on Knights of Columbus YouTube channel you can check out with him. But Father Chase is just, it's constantly striving for excellence. He's constantly focused on how he can improve, how he can grow, reading, prayer, learning from other people, and it's super encouraging and just an awesome guy to be around. So we just got to see him a few weeks ago too. So I love both of them. They've definitely both deeply impacted me. I met Father Chase when he was a seminarian at Mount St. Mary's, and then Father Meyer a little bit later, and now they know each other well at this point too, which is really cool. So it's been a fun kind of combination of things there. And then I have to give a lot of respect to somebody who's become more and more of a hero in my life that I love very deeply, which is Alex Jones, our CEO at Hallow. I think I've gotten such a beautiful perspective and viewpoint of his journey. As I remember arguing with him on Notre Dame's campus when we were 21, seniors in college, about faith-related things when he was in his atheist phase, and I was like at my peak on fire for my faith at that time. Well, hopefully not my peak. I think I've continued to go deeper, but I was
right.
I was
One
really at that point, I was definitely my peak of being on fire for my faith and apologetics and prayer and all those things. And so getting to see him go from that to now being the CEO of Hallow, of this huge company that's, over 26 million downloads, well over 1 billion prayers have been prayed in the app. And to see him, I think what I get to see from behind the scenes is having group chats with him, or sending each other memes and reels and just, chatting offline, also having work meetings and things, is just the genuineness of his faith. I think the genuineness of his journey, and just I think the beauty of going deeper and deeper, being more reliant on the Lord as things expand, as he gets
Yeah.
more responsibility, as he gets busier. And that's what I love about. I think it's one of the things you can kind of see are themes of the men that I'll highlight throughout my story and the people that I know that I look up to is you have this kind of overarching theme of embracing responsibility and also striving for excellence in the midst of it. Where I think a lot of people kind of shriek from responsibility, think they're busier than they are, think they can't take on more, throw pity parties for themselves, feel sorry for themselves, and then settle for mediocrity in the midst of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people who strive for greatness in all that they do and continue to try to get better, even as the pressure rises, the responsibility builds, and things continue to add on, I think is so awesome. So I got to give a shout out to my guy, Alex Jones. I don't give him enough credit. I don't think I've ever talked about him really in that way before, but Alex is certainly somebody I look up to.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, let's talk about seeking excellence. How do you define excellence? And then tell us about your podcast and what it is you're doing with it.
For sure. So I love the Aristotle quote that says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." And I think the question that seeking excellence is always trying to answer for me is, what is the best way to live? What should I do with my life? How should I go about sainthood and greatness in this 21st century where we're facing these things that many saints throughout history never faced? We love St. Carlo Acutis. He never had AI. He never dealt with a lot of the things
Right.
on a grander scale. We kind of like him because he played PlayStation and built a website and those sorts of things. He never had to try to break a screen addiction while raising multiple children and those sorts of things. Like there's a lot that we're dealing with
Yeah,
now
the bar
that
is higher
just,
now.
yeah, nobody's ever had to face before. And so I think striving to answer that question of how do we, and that's not it's not a criticism of him. It's just the time that he lived in, and he died at a young age. And so we have these, there's some younger saints, St. Pier Giorgio Frassati, I've just never dealt with any of those things. He lived 100 years ago. And so
Yeah, but
it's like, how do we as
couldn't have
lay
borne
people,
up under the pressures that he was handling, with the, what was it? Was he did he fight in the war? Was he like right before the war or something? Like
yes.
it's a
Yeah,
pressure
I
of the
think he
time.
was like a teenager during World War One, and so because I think he died in 1925, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And so, yeah, obviously, so he almost had the exact opposite temptations as us, right? We were facing all these cultural issues that come from a time of peace, and there wasn't a rise in what is a woman during World War One because everybody thought the world was going to end. So you didn't have time to worry about if men were competing in women's swimming. Where now, because things have been, I think, so easy for so long, now we actually have issues arising and things being made up and people fighting battles and feeling oppressed when they're not. And the internet and all these other things that I think it's kind of funny. It's literally, I think, almost the exact opposite types of struggles. I don't think, I'm not putting one against the other because I definitely don't wish for either one in our lives. And we may at some point have to deal with both of them. Who knows? But it's a difficult thing, I think, to just look at. Like, there's not a ton of lay saints throughout history, and sometimes you just need that example, or just look for, like, what does it look like to kind of strive for holiness and for greatness in our modern era. And so I came up with, over time, over years, these 6 pillars of excellence. And so I view these as kind of my report card. I love Matthew 25. Jesus tells the parable of the good steward, where he gives, he tells this parable about this guy who's going away, and he gives to his servants. He gives one talent, one he gives 3, one he gives 2, one he gives 5. And the ones with 2 and 5, we all know the story. Hopefully they double theirs. The other one with the 1 talent went and buried it in the ground. He tells the ones that doubled it, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." The one who buried it in the ground, he calls him wicked and evil and casts him off into eternal punishment. And so it's very strong. And I think that it gives us this example of, well, what has God given me to steward? Jesus was here. Jesus has gone. He's coming back again. What is it that for me, when he returns, that I ought to be a good steward of? And so I was like, I need my report card. I think one of the best things you have in college is you have this syllabus, and it kind of gives you, like, this is what you're going to be graded on. And so I needed to create that for myself, but I also feel like God kind of gives it to us. And so these 6 areas were what I think of as kind of my classes. And I view it as a grade point average where you're striving to be, an A student, but it doesn't mean that you have to have 100 in every single class. The goal is to have a high GPA, high average across the board. So mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, and professional. And so I think that each one of those areas, God has given us a mind, a body. He's given us relationships. He's given us a soul, obviously a spiritual life. He's given, you and I vocations. Everybody has a vocation, but he's given us work vocations that we have professional jobs. He's given us money to manage and to steward. And so we have to be thinking about, how do I do all of those things well from a perspective of faith and reason?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what all the content and everything that I do is kind of geared towards, trying to equip, form, and inspire people to be great in those areas.
Amazing. You said great GPA, and I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. Grace point average is kind of cool. So
yeah, that's good.
Last kind of question then for you. With all the work that you're doing, either at Hallow or at Seeking Excellence or in your personal life, you're trying to show up, I assume, or imagine you're trying to show up to serve a specific kind of person, the kind of person maybe you can connect most with. So who do you want to be a hero for, or at least put in heroic effort to serve that person? And I'm going to be annoying. You can't say God or your family because those are givens. So who out there in the world and in your life do you want to be a hero for?
Yeah, I think to me, most clearly is kind of this persona of younger me. And so I think there's a lot of guys out there who want to do things differently than what they experienced when they were growing up. They want to be a different father. Maybe they feel called to the priesthood. They want to be a different priest, or they want to emulate the priest that they, knew as a child in their childhood parish or whatever. But I think for a lot of us, we're trying to break the mold. We're trying to change directions. We're trying to increase the faith and the excellence with everything that we're doing. And so for the young guys out there, I think that don't have the male role model that they're looking for, that can't find somebody who's going to encourage them, that can't find somebody who's going to challenge them, but they have this desire that I had, which was, I really want to be great. I truly do. I truly wanted to be the best that I could be. I wanted to be a good Catholic, and I was frustrated by people who would tell me, there's no such thing as a good Catholic or a bad Catholic or those sorts of things. I was like, I don't want to hear that, because then I can't be a great one. I need you to lay out for me, what does it look like? Right. What do I need to do to achieve that? What do I need to avoid and not do? Just like on the physical fitness side, it was very clear. Well, if I eat this way and I do these exercises, I'm going to be in great shape. And if I'm in great shape, I'm going to be a great Army platoon leader. And so like having that kind of path, I think, to what does excellence look like? What does greatness look like? I know there's a lot of guys out there who are being fed bad things, who are being fed lies about whether it's their masculinity, about pursuing financial excellence, whether it's about pursuing the importance of fitness, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of lies out there. And so I'm constantly trying to combat those lies and really just working each and every day to inspire young men out there to be their very best, to take the reins on being a leader in their home, being a leader in the workplace, being a leader in their community, taking responsibility, not just for one, you have to take responsibility for themselves, which a lot of young people in general and people in general don't do. Taking responsibility for your own life, but then seeing how much responsibility, how you can grow your capacity to take on more and more responsibility as we try to turn around the culture, the country, the church, the world.
Thanks for joining us. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, send us a message at heroicmen.org/stories. Our partner at CatholicSpeakers.com has built the easiest way to book powerful Catholic speakers for your men's event. They are the #1 resource worldwide for event organizers and Catholic speakers. Book easily, confidently, and ask for several grants to support ministry to men. Visit heroicmen.org/speakers today. Come and share your journey in the Heroic Brotherhood, our online community for Catholic men like you. Get the app with the best Catholic media for men, including Heroic Men's original series, Be a Man. It's all free because an alliance of donors already paid it forward for you. Stand with us. Let's build the future of Catholic men. Will you pay it forward? $5 a month pays it forward for 5 men. Visit Heroic Men to stand with us. Because men like us, we leave no man behind. Visit heroicmen.org today.